I want to find aliens. Finding life on another planet is not just going to be a little hard, it's going to be very hard.
Professor Sarah Rugheimer joins the MS Guide to talk about something else that's really, really hard. And that is about the problems, challenges, timings, etc. of disclosing MS to your employer. So sit down and join us, because that starts right now.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the MS Guide. After my disabling relapse for a short time, I'm feeling better and I've managed to come to Oxford, or at Jesus College, which is one of the Oxford colleges, to catch up with a good friend of mine who I met whilst having an infusion, Sarah Rugheimer, or more correctly, Professor Sarah Rugheimer.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell everyone what you're a professor of.
I'm an astrophysicist and I study how we might be able to detect life on other planets.
And I think, I haven't told Sarah I was going to say this, but probably the most embarrassing thing for me is Sarah has a video on YouTube, a TED Talk, with over 1 million views. So
1.7 million views now.
well, I've just been told, but it's something that I'm achieving or trying to achieve. So hopefully Sarah will help push me over it. Anyway, Sarah has MS. I have MS. We met having infusions. Sarah was having Lemtrada. I was having Ocrevus at the time. I'm now on Lemtrada, so we're Lemtrada buddies. But Sarah's come back from Canada, where she is now a professor at which university?
York University in Toronto.
Right, okay. And we are going to talk specifically and quite briefly about disclosing MS to your employer. Because it's something that Sarah has had, we say, battles and problems and issues with. And I think it's important because everybody always wants to know. So, Sarah, let's get straight into this. Do you mind telling people how old you are?
Yes, I'm 39.
Right.
I was diagnosed when I was 26.
Right. So how long have you been in a work environment with MS?
I mean, yeah, so for the whole time,
Right.
13 years.
Okay,
and
yeah.
I was a second-year PhD student at Harvard.
Right.
And I think what clued me into the fact that this is a real problem was I went on a climb, an MS climb, and I didn't worry about using my real name. And then after that climb was done, the first 5 links on Google told anyone who's Googling my name that I had MS, and the 6th one was my astronomy page.
So
and
this wasn't an MS problem, this was an MS out there in the world,
yes,
and you not
anyone.
Controlling the flow of information.
Exactly.
And any potential employer, which in your world is academia, knowing first that you had MS,
immediately,
then
yes,
that you may be an astrophysicist or an astrobiologist, whatever.
Yes.
So I think that's a concern for a lot of people is, I want to control my information. I know I certainly
especially
felt
with the internet.
Yeah.
So I had those pages taken down, and then I used a pseudonym for the whole time of having MS until I came out this year when I was at Harvard giving a colloquium. Went back and I decided a colloquium, like
which is for people that aren't in the world.
Fancy science talk to the department.
Right. So you were giving an MS talk to other people, and
not an MS talk, astrophysics.
Yeah. Astrophysics talk to other people,
yeah.
And you said, and by the way, or it came into the talk somehow.
At the end, I said, thank you so much for the support I had here when I was a grad student. I was very quiet about it. Only a few people knew. Some of the professors, including my own, was very supportive, and I really appreciate that. And now I'm facing immigration hurdles in Canada, which I'm sure we'll get to. And I need community again. And I've decided now, being a professor myself, it's time to come out.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I when I was younger, coming up with something quite different. But
exactly.
I understand exactly what you mean. So what's your worst experience of telling somebody? And what's your best experience of telling somebody in this work environment that you have MS?
Yeah. I think my worst experience was I had found an academic mentor. And I really trusted this person. We had mentor chats about
at Harvard at the time,
how to navigate academia. And, I was like, here's someone I'm going to trust. I'm going to choose to disclose that I have MS. So we were having one of our scheduled mentorship chats. And then this professor kind of just said, oh, well, if you're going to die in 3 years, what would you do? And I said, well, I mean, MS isn't terminal.
You told him that you had MS. So that was the question was, I want to know what you're going to do in your remaining 3 years on this planet, if that was going to be the case.
If that was going to be the case. And I was like, well, it's not terminal, but, if
and you were doing a PhD at the time, so you were how old?
So I was probably like 29.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and so then I remember saying, like, just very openly and honestly, I was like, well, if I knew I had 3 years to live, like say it was ALS or something.
Yeah.
I was like, I would spend time with my family, travel the world, And he said, well, you didn't say science, so you shouldn't be a scientist. If I was going to die in 3 years, I would double down on my science. Funny story, this later kind of happened to this person in a different context, and they did not double down on their science.
Right. So my view on this, being considerably older than Sarah, I've sued employer one in the past, and is that you've got to remember, no one's going to give you a medal when you die for being at work for more time.
Exactly.
Whether or not you'd found another 2 exoplanets that somebody else was arguably looking for or not. Yeah. So that is, but their view was, if you didn't devote all your life in that, your remaining 3 years.
Exactly. If I didn't really double down on my science. In fact, that was also the graduate chair was like, oh, when he found out I was diagnosed with MS, he's like, oh, just immerse yourself in your research. And I was like, in the hospital,
I'm immersing myself in getting better.
Exactly. So I'd seen a number of negative comments, heard other people talking about people with illnesses, chronic illness, and
that's what I was going to say. You were on some sort of academic committee, weren't you, where other disabled people were being discussed?
Exactly. And one student in particular was at the top of their class, and the committee was like, well, we're really worried. This is a problem student. And other people on the committee were like, but they're at the top of their class. And they're like, but, they're sick all the time. And I don't think it's going to go well. And another comment was made about, well, some people can't play basketball. Some people can't do science.
What was it?
If you have a disability.
If you're in a wheelchair, you'll never play basketball. I think Mark Webb particularly would beg to differ, because he plays rugby, and that looks pretty brutal. And have you seen their wheelchairs?
I mean,
they're like tanks.
Yeah, it's also just a misunderstanding, I guess.
Quite,
maybe he was talking about MBA or something, but at the same time, I'd heard that, and then I had some initial bad experiences, and I was like, oh, I need to be quiet about this.
So I mean, that's the underlying thing, is bad experience can make you, should we say, doubly wary. So.
But I had a good experience,
I was
which you
also
asked.
Tell us your best one, because we've got to moderate this.
Yeah, exactly. My best one was thankfully my first one when I was in the ER on my first round of steroids with my diagnosing.
26 years old when you got diagnosed. And this was in Canada, wasn't it?
No, this was at Harvard in
Harvard
Boston.
In the States, yeah.
So I was in...
Sarah's international.
I've lived in a lot of countries. But anyway, so I was in the hospital, and my PhD supervisor came in, Dimitar Saslov, and he was just so kind, and he said, you know what, it's no big deal, work 5 hours a day, take a year longer to graduate, no one will notice. And it's true, like, no one did notice. I took about a half a year longer to graduate, and it's never come up.
So now 13 years later, you're a professor, you have a chair at a university. You got that, it loads me to say it, the TED Talk with 1.7 million views. But it's I just oh my gosh, you've managed to make it all this way with MS, you lucky person. But there's
been struggles.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Sure.
me, you, everybody. But I think if you've got MS and you've been newly diagnosed, I mean, I can give you advice, but Sarah, when someone is diagnosed, and this is one of the many things that's going through their head, what would your advice be?
I think, I've seen it happen too with other newly diagnosed people. A lot of people want to be open. Because you assume people will be nice and friendly, and you want support. And sometimes it backfires, and you can't tell who it's going to backfire with. And that power, because once you say it, you can't unsay it. As you said, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. So I would urge caution. I'm a very open person. I want to be open about things, but it was definitely a case where I'd seen it go wrong a few times, and even just seen how it's out on the internet and you can't put it back in. And so I would urge caution, more caution than maybe you would think.
Yeah. So if I was going to summarize this, wouldn't it be a lovely world if everybody is nice? Right. However,
they're not.
Be very, very and I mean, you were hugely surprised by your nominee mentors' response. So what I'm saying is, the people that are the most that you think are not going to ruin it so it's hard to tell, isn't it? It's really hard to tell, and I've had good responses from people, I've had bad responses from people. It's very difficult, even though you think you know them as a person. I've had people who are friends who then start interpreting every action I do through MS. Like when I leave an event early, they're like, oh, it must
must be fatigue. And I'm like, no, I just don't want to hang out anymore.
I can't stand you guys and this rubbish booze. And frankly, I've got a nice bit at home. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. So, okay, so be cautious. My message would be, it's really tough. I'm 54. I've made some good judgments on this, but I've also made some not so good judgments on this. Part of it is you're going to have to roll with the punches. Part of it is knowing that things aren't always going to go your way. So, and it's coping, isn't it? I mean, look, you're here now. You've managed. You disclosed. There's been a bit of a rocky road, but thank you very much for sharing your experience with everybody.
Yeah, and I would just say that at some point you have to weigh the cost of hiding it too. There is a cost there. So for me, at some point, the cost of not being open about it, where I had reached more professional security, I was like, I would rather make an impact in my position and to other young scientists with disabilities out there. But recognize there could be a cost too of disclosing. So you have to weigh those. So
there you go. Like most of life, it's a definite maybe, but that's the way it is. But thank you again, Sarah, for sharing your experience. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.